Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This request by the government is seemingly routine, but it masks a dismaying record of, unfortunately, a dismaying record of economic mismanagement and budgetary failure. The 2019-20 budget ushered in by this finance minister had proposed an expenditure of 27,86,349 crores. And the supplementary demand for grants, she is now seeking approval for a gross expenditure of 21,246 crores more, which will be a 0.7% increase from the approved budget. Now that's not unreasonable. But if we were to look at all of this, the incremental cash outgo in the supplementary demands will have to be met through an increase in either borrowings or an increase in revenue. Now, sir, during the actual debate on the budget in this House, I had pointed out that the government's projections for revenue were unduly optimistic. I'm sorry to say, no one likes to do it, that I told you so, but that's exactly what we are seeing today. During the 7 months of this new government, sir, the government has collected a revenue of 9.3 lakh crores out of the budget estimate of 20.8 lakh crores for the current fiscal year, not counting borrowings. So in 7 months, the figures should have been well above 50% of their projections, close to 60%. Instead, the figures are only at 45%. As I said, I told you so. I'm sorry. We were sold a budget which was always based on unrealistic revenue projections. The collections under the various components of revenue during this period, if you look at the central government's net tax revenue, it's at 41%, 6.8 lakh crores. If you look at corporate tax, it's at 36%, sir, in 7 months. Income tax, 43% in 7 months. And disinvestment, which is the other possible source of money coming into the government, is 17,365 crores, or 17% of their budgeted target for this fiscal year of 1.05 lakh crore. So the numbers speak for themselves, sir. During the presentation of the budget last time, the government had mentioned that it would stick to a target of 3.3% for the fiscal deficit. Now, this was always a long shot at best. I must say that every year, the finance minister's honorable predecessor has also regularly made commitments and failed to meet them. Thank you. As I pointed out in the budget debate, Arun Jaitley, our good friend, the late Arun Jaitley, kept having to adjust the fiscal deficit target every single year that he was finance minister. For another, there was always an assumption of a growth in tax revenue to offset increased government spending on schemes like PM Kisan, which was conceived in time for the elections. Now, in the present scenario, even the finance minister has admitted to the media that there's a possibility of fiscal slippage in the current fiscal year. I've been told there's a quote from you in the media. Okay, I will ask my staff where that comes from. But there will be a slippage, ma'am.
Oh, no, I don't take that.
Difficult to maintain the fiscal discipline.
I believe your exact quote is difficult to maintain fiscal discipline.
Sorry, let me hear that.
It will be difficult to maintain fiscal discipline.
Sorry, just 1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, we will get the exact quote, but let me put it in my words. You will not, ma'am, you will have a slippage in your fiscal deficit this year.
All right.
That's my argument.
Into my mouth.
And I think you will have to readjust your figure as your predecessors have had to do. And that's unfortunately the reality we're facing today. Now, on the economic conditions under which the supplementary demands are coming in, we all know that traditional economic wisdom dictates that the GDP of the country will only grow if the key contributors to it expand, such as investment, manufacturing, consumption, exports. But here we have a peculiar situation where all of these are going down and have in fact hit rock bottom. But the government still believes it can sell the idea of a $5 trillion economy without offering us a roadmap of exactly how this will happen. At least the Prime Minister keeps talking of a $5 trillion GDP, but the Honorable Mr. Nishikant Dubey believes that GDP is not important, and I'm not sure who is the more reputed economist amongst the two of them. But the fact is that GDP growth rate in the most recent quarter has been considerably lower than such fevered fantasies, at a tepid 4.5%, a sixth consecutive quarter of slowing growth. The new figures represent a stunning decline. The country's GDP was growing by more than 9% at the start of 2016, a legacy of the Manmohan Singh years. And today, 4.5% has become the new normal. So with GDP growth at a 16-year low, unemployment at a 46-year high, household consumption at a 4-decade low, bad loans and a rising number of non-performing assets, we are also witnessing an all-time high in terms of a drop in private investment. If we look at unemployment today, it's 7.48% in November. The labour participation rate is the lowest it's been in recent memory. And in fact, the unemployment rate touched a 3-year high in October of 8.45%. In rural areas, it's doubled from 2013-14 fiscal year to 17-18 fiscal year. There's been over a 50% increase in employment in many sectors in the urban areas, and urban males in particular have suffered. As per a working paper published by the Azim Premji University, we've seen 9 million people losing jobs between 2012 and 2018, and that's an average of about a couple of million a year between these crucial periods that the BJP was largely in power. This clearly called for remedial measures under the supplementary demands for grants to do something about employment generation, but these are not forthcoming. Instead, what do we have? We have salaries for police and armed forces, under which the government proposes to spend 3,387 crores to pay salaries and the cost of rations for the police, 2,000 crores for payment of salaries and allowances for the armed forces, but supplementary demands for grants are meant for expenditures that could not have been anticipated in the regular budget. But these are standard exercises. These salaries and ration costs, they haven't gone up since the budget was approved. Why was this not anticipated instead of coming back to us 4 months after the budget was already approved? Now, if you look at the situation that we are seeing in the country, sir, the National Statistical Office tells us that rural poverty has risen nearly 4 percentage points to 30%, and that given the size of the rural population, the overall estimated poverty rate has gone up nearly a percentage point to 23%, which means, simple mathematics, that about 30 million people have fallen behind or below our India's official poverty line in the last 6 years that the BJP has been in power. They have presided over increasing poverty. 30 million people who are above the poverty line have fallen below it. And with growing unemployment and increasing poverty, surely the one thing the minister could have thought about in her supplementary demands for grants would have been more allocations for the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, because there we are facing a situation in which many people, I think MPs have already complained during question hour, many people working in the scheme have not been given their salaries. I have met workers in my constituency who have not been paid their rural employment guarantee wages for 7 months. And this situation, sir, the union budget, as well as the supplementary demands, have ignored issues of social security and employment. They have shown no intention of boosting rural India's needs. It was a disappointment, of course, for 13 crore rural households that are dependent on Manrega. The 2019-20 budget has a lower figure than the revised estimate for the previous fiscal. 61,084 crores was 2018-19, only 60,000 crores this year, and nothing. After reducing the budget from 1 year to the next, nothing has been added in the supplementary demands for grants. So this is incomprehensible, Mr. Chairman, because in fact, all experts have said that for this scheme to work and benefit the intended targets, you cannot do it for less than 88,000 crores. The centre had to allocate supplementary budgets for 3 straight years after original allocations were exhausted in the first few months of the respective fiscal financial years, because the workers need the jobs. But those allocations in the past were delayed, people didn't get their wages on time, workers slowed down. Nobody got 100 days under BJP rule, the guaranteed 100 days of Manrega. And on top of that, I see that the fiscal year 18 below 50 days of employment was provided on average at the All India level. So in these circumstances, surely what we needed were more supplementary grants for NREGA so that people can get their wages on time, so that, and by the way, 78% of all NREGA wages have, NREGA wages have been paid late, 78%. And what is more, they have not been paying compensation for delayed payment. So these are people who need this money from their employment to be able to live, sir, and they're not being given their money by this government. Unfortunately, fiscal year 17 is the last figure I have. 11,000 crore in wages were unpaid by the central government, and in the first 2 quarters of 17-18, 32% of the payments of all that was made. An activist filed an RTI that revealed that in fiscal year 18, there were 13.17 crore people registered under NREGA, but only 5.73 crore workers sought work and only 5.1 were given work, with the result that obviously the government was not spending the money it should have been spending. I would have said that in this was a missed opportunity to increase the allotments to the Mahatma Gandhi NREGA scheme in order to benefit people who are getting increasingly poor with the passage of time. So where will the revenues come from? Coming back to the question of the government's challenges. Not from manufacturing. The manufacturing growth rate has now been so subdued, and we all know that for our economic growth to reach the kinds of levels we once used to routinely take for granted, our manufacturing sector would need to grow in double digits. Instead, it's at a very subdued rate of around 3% for the last 5 years. From 2.8, in fact, to 4.6, averaging just above 3. The Indian automobile sector is in disastrous shape, worst ever half-yearly performance. The two-wheeler sector is plummeting, registering a major dip. And auto components, which I think the finance minister's own state was leading the country in manufacturing, have had a dip of 22%. So the result is we're looking at the worst figures in the automobile sector in the last 2 decades. And this is the crisis that we are facing. At the same time, revenues are not going to come from consumer spending, because consumer spending fell for the first time in more than 4 decades last year. Every year for 40 years, our consumers have been spending more. Especially after NREGA came in, rural demand went up, people had more purchasing power in the rural areas. All that has gone, sir. We have seen a decline for the first time in 40 years, according to the latest consumption expenditure survey by the National Statistical Office. And what we're seeing is that the average amount of money spent by an Indian in a month has fallen from 3.7% in 2017-18 to, from 2017-18, 2011-12, it's fallen by 3.7%. And what is shocking, sir, is that there appears to be a dip in food consumption, including on essential food items. The most disconcerting bit to economists has been that this is the first time it's happened in decades. Former Planning Commission member Obijit Sen said that a fall in food spending, especially in villages, shows that malnutrition has increased. It would be fair to say that poverty has increased significantly. But there are, as I said, no new welfare schemes envisaged in the supplementary demands by the Honourable Finance Minister. What does the government wish to spend the money on? Now, we are told that allocations for the new union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are going to get 8,821 crores. We all know that it's been nearly 4 months since on the 5th of August, the High Home Minister introduced the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill into the upper house of Parliament. And since that time, our own citizens, our own political leaders, one of our own members has been living under a clampdown, has been living in detention. In the absence of any return to normalcy in Kashmir, these allocations to the areas would mean very little. We know that 30 political leaders were kept under detention, some of them in solitary, including a former Minister of State of the government of Mr. Vajpayee, a former Chief Minister in a coalition government with the BJP, and a currently serving MP. And what are we seeing, sir? These people, as well as other leaders, are being shunted from now one location to another, amid allegations of manhandling by the police. Meanwhile, terrorism keeps going up. According to the government's own data provided here by the MOS for Home Affairs, Cross-border infiltration along the line of control has gone up by almost 50% since the provisions of Article 370, I'll just take 2 minutes more, sir, were abrogated and Kashmir was put under a lockdown. So with all the attempts at infiltration that have been reported in this House, with tourism going down, and our own Prime Minister having said to the youth of Kashmir, go for tourism and not terrorism, with communications lockdown and loss of income for telephone companies, with online merchants not able to sell their Kashmiri handicrafts and goods to the world because there is no internet, we are looking at a situation in which Jammu and Kashmir is dire and routine supplementary expenditures are not going to help. On the missing allocation, sir, and then I will conclude, I've already mentioned Unrega. Fisheries, sir, there's been a repeated demand from coastal area MPs in the state for additional funding for our coastal areas. There's rampant coastal erosion. There have been severe climatic attacks on our country. Cyclone Oki, we've heard about Cyclone Gaja in Orissa. There have been floods in many parts of the country. Kerala suffered terrible floods in August 2018 and 2019. We are shocked the government broke its campaign promise to create a dedicated fisheries ministry for this area, but the very least they can do is to have a focus on the needs of our coastal communities, particularly our fishing communities, to provide a comprehensive economic package to offset the losses they're suffering, cyclones, floods and coastal erosion, strengthen their coastal seawalls, help. This could have been easily allocated in the supplementary demands, and it hasn't. Instead, sir, in my own constituency, we have a premier hospital that used to give free service to the poor.
Please conclude,
the Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute. And the government apparently is giving so little money now that they're having to charge people, poor people, for services in that hospital that used to be free until today, until the 1st of December. So this government is trying to pinch pennies at the expense of the Aam Aadmi, of the poor person of this country, but is not actually doing anything to help the larger picture to be addressed. Let me stress, sir, whether we grow at 9% or as we once did under UPA, or at 4.5% as we're now growing today, the fact is our fundamental commitment must be to the bottom 25% of our society. And this government has sadly been pushing more and more people below the poverty line without addressing it. They have talk of New India, sir. They're talking of... Sir, just one sec. Yes, I'm going to conclude. I just want to stress that you must have a new India that both promotes higher economic growth, whether or not some members believe GDP matters or not. Clearly you need higher economic growth, but to please ensure that the benefits of this growth are enjoyed by the poor and disadvantaged sections of our society. The truth is, our former Prime Minister said you need trust in society to create a healthy economy.
Please
that
conclude,
also needs to be
Tharoor,
restored.
you have 8 speakers from your
All
party.
this requires a vision that is sadly missing from the original budget and is still absent in these supplementary demands for grants.
Thank you.
I just want to conclude by saying that it's time for the government to correct course and steer this country in the right direction, which it has not been doing in the economy all this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.